Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is my review of the Agency Arms Field Edition Glock 17. Alright, so my review of the Agency Arms Glock 17 Field Edition. With aftermarket modifications to handguns, companies that do those, one of the things that they can do is they can take the gun out of spec. They can make significant enough modifications to the frame or to the slide to take the gun out of the originally engineered specifications and tolerances for performance. So when I review a gun, any gun really, but specifically a gun that's been modified in that way, I want to put enough ammunition through the firearm to make sure it's going to function reliably as it would from the factory. 2,000 rounds I think is a really good baseline to both get the gun naturally dirty through the firing of ammunition and introduce it to some foreign substances, some foreign debris and things of that nature, running the gun as hard as I can to see if I can affect its performance after it's been modified by that company. All right, so the 2,000 round review, I kept the testing realistic as possible, but I wanted to push the bounds of that realism. If you've seen some of my other firearms reviews, you know I don't get too ridiculous with it. I'm testing the reliability of the weapon under adverse conditions. That's it. I know I can get any gun to fail if I make the testing hard enough. I could drag it behind a truck, I could drop it off a 4-story building, although most guns will still function after that. Some guns will still function after that. But I wanted to keep it realistic because as the buyer, the potential buyer, I want you to see what your gun's capable of without you necessarily having to purposely push it to that point. Most people are not going to voluntarily rub their gun in mud to see if it's going to work. Knowing that it will do that, knowing that it will perform through that without having to physically do it yourself unless you happen to find yourself in a situation where it's unavoidable, is kind of peace of mind. Guns are investments. The Glock is already an investment. It's one of the more reasonably priced firearms on the market, but after you do modifications to it, you've got more intrinsic and more monetary value in it. So do you really want to be rubbing $1,300 in the mud? Most people don't want to, but they'd like to know if they had to, the gun will still perform, which is why people like us do reviews of these firearms, and we have no qualms whatsoever about abusing the guns so you don't have to. One of the things that impresses me the most about this gun, just getting right into it, is the fact that it retains almost all factory parts. There's some aesthetic milling to the slide, there's some functional milling to the slide, some functional stippling, some functional radiusing, things of that nature to the frame. But internally, it's almost 100% stock Glock with some modifications. That's huge to me because a lot of the already engineered Glock parts function fine. They can be a little gritty, they can be a little stiff, but as a reliable firearm, I think the reliability of Glock is very, very well known already. Agency didn't want to change that reliability, they just wanted to smooth it out. One spring, the trigger safety, and the trigger body itself have been replaced. That's it. Everything else is the original Glock factory parts. Some of them have been tuned for performance, but it retains that Glock reliability, retains that Glock safety. I think that's very, very impressive. There is not a lot of needless things done to this gun, which is one of the risks you run when you get into aftermarket modified Glocks. Is some things some companies, I should say, take things to the extreme of aesthetics. They want to go for look, and eventually that look starts to mess with the tolerances, the original engineered tolerances of the firearm, and it can affect reliability under adverse conditions. Alright, so in this review I'll be looking at the spec and the reliability of the firearm, making sure it functions, of course. But there's also 3 unique features to this gun that I think really make it stand out, really add to the value of the aftermarket modification from Agency Arms. The trigger, obviously, a lot of people are very interested in the trigger, so we're definitely going to go in depth on that. The rear cocking serrations, I'm going to mention those because they're doing something here that I haven't seen anybody else do. It's something you wouldn't appreciate until you actually handled the firearm, I don't think. And the forward accelerator pad, which I think is a very good benefit to the firearm. Yeah. With spec testing, it's essentially just running the gun hard, running as many magazines as you can, as fast as you can, running it through adverse conditions, introducing dirt and debris and just environmental things that are going to happen to the gun as you run it on a range. The reason I do that is because I want to make sure that they didn't engineer or re-engineer the tolerances of the firearm and take it out of spec so much that it's only going to function with certain mags under certain conditions, with certain ammunition, things of that nature. With the Agency Arms, I didn't have any issues. 2,000 rounds, not a single malfunction. That's not really saying much, and it's saying a whole lot at the same time. They didn't over-engineer or rethink or try to reinvent the wheel with the gun. They simply improved on what they thought needed to be improved. The gun is still as reliable as a Glock is out of the box. Obviously, the added benefits are some of the features they include with their modifications, with their improvements. But as far as spec testing goes, the gun spec'd very well. In fact, it spec'd incredibly well. It spec'd flawlessly as far as my review at this point is concerned. I took it to 2,000 rounds, no issues, not a single malfunction. So for frame modifications, really aggressive stipple. They remove the finger grooves, and they have a kind of a unique undercut that's a really aggressive, it's a really high undercut, lets you choke up really high on the gun, which I like. Due to the way my middle finger is on my primary hand, I need a very high undercut. For some people, the Glock stock trigger guard is an inconvenience. For me, it's a necessity to have an undercut done, so I really appreciate the way they do theirs. Another significant frame modification that I talked about is their accelerator pad. It is an angled ledge. It gives you a purchase point with your support hand thumb. It allows you to put downward pressure on the frame of the gun to keep the muzzle lower during recoil, as you'll see in some of these videos. I think that feature stands out a lot. I've seen it done before. It's been applied to polymer guns as long as polymer guns have been polymer guns. Agency is included in their package because it's something that's out there. It's something that they feel should be on the gun, and I definitely agree with them. I think it's a very beneficial feature to have on the firearm. One, it gives you a really positive indexing point for your grip, and two, it allows you to apply downward pressure on the frame to keep that muzzle low. I really, really like that a lot. When it comes to agency's modifications to the slide, at least on the field model, the rear serrations are radiused in, which give you a more positive grip. It basically ribs the rear serrations very, very aggressively. In addition to being very good DNA collectors for when you actually put your hands on it and rack the gun, it gives you a much more positive grip than a standard Glock, and a much more positive grip than any other aftermarket Glock I've tried. I don't know why anyone else isn't doing this or why they haven't done it sooner. I think it's a very, very good feature. Obviously, you have the front serrations if that's something you need. These are also very, very aggressive, very sticky. So it's really hard not to get things right when you're using the front serrations, rear serrations, whatever you're going to use. They radius the sides in, and then of course they do your RMR cut. Mine is unique in the fact that I prefer my rear sights forward to the optic as opposed to rear. I've talked about the benefits of this before. I'm actually going to do a specific video later on to let you know why I like mine this way, but one of the added benefits right off the bat is the fact it's going to protect your RMR. Their standard configuration comes with a striker plate which covers where the RMR goes. So if you don't want the RMR on the gun, or if you just haven't gotten your RMR yet, or you just want to shoot iron sights, you can take the RMR off, put the striker plate on, you're good to go.
The 9mm is already known for its light recoil, though in any caliber the agency guns are well suited to added recoil control via the accelerator pad and a good balance of weight reduction in key areas for the slide. When compared to a stock OEM Glock, the recoil differences are noticeable in a reduction of muzzle rise during firing.
All right, probably my favorite feature is the agency arms trigger. A lot of people have been talking about it. It's a flat profile trigger, which there aren't too many of those aftermarket or otherwise available for the Glock. The thing that stands out to me the most, just before I even shot the gun, was the trigger safety itself. It doesn't stick out in a way that some of the other trigger safeties do on aftermarket triggers. It's not as prominent, and you don't feel it as much in your contact with the trigger. It's still there, it's still positive, you still feel it, you still know it's there, but it doesn't interrupt your finger contact in the way that some of the aftermarket triggers do, or the stock Glock trigger does. As far as trigger press goes, this was the 4-pound trigger. It's constant pressure, pre-travel, break, through reset. You never have a dead space in the trigger where you can't physically feel where the trigger's at in its motion. You know where it's at, constant pressure. You've got constant light resistance depending on where you are in the trigger pull that lets you know the trigger's sure, the trigger's there, and the trigger's going to do exactly what it's supposed to do every single time. There's no spongy feeling, which I really appreciated. I've used some aftermarket triggers where everything was good until reset, but between all the way back to the wall, forward to reset, I didn't physically know where the trigger was because I wasn't getting any active pressure. The trigger wasn't speaking to my finger, so to speak. The agency trigger, everything is constant contact. I like that a lot. You can run these flat profile triggers really, really fast once you get used to the feel of them. They are definitely different than the standard Glock trigger, but I appreciate the fact that its flat profile lends itself really, really well to constant control, lends itself really, really well to speed shooting, and lends itself really, really well to your more precise, measured, slow presses to get a long distance accuracy shot.
The Glock is already an inherently accurate handgun. Since Agency makes no changes to the barrel, with quality sights and properly zeroed RDS, accuracy is exceptional.
So the functionality, the reliability, I think the review kind of speaks for itself. Agency's doing things right. They're making a really, really good gun. I went into this open-minded. I didn't know a whole lot about Agency. They were a new company, but I'm leaving with some biases. I've already sold my personal carry ZevTech, and I plan on carrying an Agency Arms Glock 19 as my everyday carry. That's how behind the gun I am. I was very, very impressed with everything the gun did, and I was very, very impressed with all the problems I didn't have. They're not an aesthetically focused company. The modifications are all functionality related. Aesthetics comes second. That's the impression that I get from the way the gun works, from the way the gun operates, and from the way the gun looks. It is a good looking gun, but I can tell just from the milling and the modifications, those were secondary to the function of the firearm itself. Even with the urban and the hybrid models, with the way they cut their windows, the way they're applying things to the gun itself, they want to make sure it functions before it looks good. The appearance comes second, which I really appreciate. There's no needless features, which I also appreciate. When it comes to aftermarket Glocks, I will unequivocally say that these are the Agency Arms guns are the best ones I've ever fired, specifically with all the time that I've spent with this field model. Best aftermarket Glock I've ever put my hands on. I haven't shot all of them, but I've shot most of them, and I've owned a few of them. And I'm 100% sold on the way that Agency Arms is doing their guns. So, when it comes to aftermarket Glock modifications, Agency Arms, drop the mic. Yeah, I was gonna yeah, right here. I was gonna stand just like this. Be like, hey everybody, I'm Aaron Cowan with Sage Dynamics, and this is one of the few times you'll see me use the stool position. I see you. Hello.